How do you know when it's time to exploit versus exploit?
When you're getting recognition for something that you're doing. Generally speaking, this is tough to do early in your career. Instead of focusing on trying to fix things, there's weaknesses that need to be sometimes you might have to take 2 steps back or maybe 3 steps back to take a big giant leap forward. Yeah, I could do the job, but I didn't love it. It was all part of the process.
How do you use your podcast to differentiate yourself as a recruiter?
It turned into a relationship first before handout asking for business. So I would say at least 60+% has been driven by the podcast. For me, that is plan your work and work your plans. In general, I want to be more interested than interesting. At the end of the day, your audience is the most important. Relationships directly correlated to the podcast. If you find in your career, your passion and your work intersect, that's the goal. I learned that lesson early on to shut up and listen. Because as you mentioned before, that's where the gold is.
What's been the secret to staying consistent?
I found other ways to monetize.
Adam, welcome on Podcast Gurus. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Usam. Thank you for welcoming me to your show.
So before we started, we were just talking about what you got in your background. So NHP Talent Group. So who's the N and the H?
Yeah, the N and the H are the same person. These initials right here are my daughter's initials. I named my recruitment business after her almost 7 years ago when I went out on my own to launch my own recruiting practice after working for a couple of search firms. And honestly, I had a tough time with the name. I was throwing around all these cliche names for recruiting practice, Star Talent, Rocket Talent, all these kind of names. And my wife said to me, as she usually is a voice of intelligence and reason in the relationship, she said, "What's the most important thing in your life?" And at the time, before my son was born, it was my daughter. Now it's obviously both of them equally. And I named the company after her. And I always have my North Star in focus. I always have it looking over my shoulder and keeping me on the straight and narrow.
Yeah. Now, coming with the name is so interestingly enough. So your NHP Talent, our agency is called GHA Marketing. So we're in the 3-letter acronym group together.
Yeah.
So that's great.
3 is a good number. 4 makes it a little weird.
3 is the golden number. It's the best. It's the best number. We were actually ours was it's right now it's me and Guillaume. So Guillaume Hassan, and we had a third partner when we started. He had some different ideas and he wanted to go his own way. So we said, okay, no worries at all. But we already had the company incorporated. So we just kind of rolled with it.
Makes sense.
Kept the A. But you said your daughter also is a co-host on your show sometimes.
Yeah. So the show's been on for, February was our 5-year anniversary since February 2019. She's been on the show, I think 5 times. She's done two actual podcasts with me where just her and I. And I've been doing for the last 4 years an annual end-of-year wrap-up live show, and where I broadcast live stream for 2 hours, and I invite a bunch of friends and guests and just people that I love onto the show for 10, 15 minutes, and we catch up about how their year was, good wishes for the year ahead of us. And my daughter's usually right by my side, and it's fun for her to interact. And honestly, man, it's a time capsule. We've looked back every year. We look back at the first couple of years and see how little she is and how high she has to stand next to me on the desk. And now, as the set has evolved, I have a microphone next to her. She has her own, channel on the mixer. It's pretty cool.
Nice. And she's 12 now, right?
Yeah.
So
she's actually, she loves it and she enjoys it. And my son, who is turning 6, he has been really bugging me to come on the show. And this will be the year. I'm going to invite him on this summer. We're going to do an episode.
Nice. Is he at all salty about the fact that it got named before, or the company got named before he was born? And
he doesn't realize this yet.
After him?
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't realize it yet. And I think we'll get to a point soon where he's going to look up and be like, "What, Dad? What the heck does this mean?" Exactly. And then I'll have to start a third company, and it'll be great. And it'll be a ton of fun.
So, speaking of names, right? So you've got the talent acquisition, so executive search and talent access company, right? NHP Capital, NHP Talent, sorry. And that's all there. But your podcast isn't branded to the company. It's actually branded to you personally, right? How does that? It is. But if you notice on the actual show graphics, this is powered by NHP Talent Group. It's subtle. It's not over the top. It's a connection. And the show and the recruitment business have organically really morphed into driving one another. One feeds the other. And without the podcast, I think I would just be, for lack of a better way of saying it, just another recruiter out there. But the podcast, powered by NHP Talent Group, has really given me a platform for my name, my brand, and more importantly, to establish myself as a thought leader in the industry. And how do I stand out from other recruiters? How do I drive business in a unique way that's not cold calling and spamming and, sending, fake candidates to clients? No. I found organically that if I invite the right guests onto the show, that opens up relationships for business, for connections, and for networking. And that's what I've been doing and doubling and tripling down on that for the past 5 years. And it's been fantastic.
So your tagline is career and life, right? It's not just about the recruiting stuff, right? You also do
No, not at all.
episodes just around what's interesting to you, I guess.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the show started out in February of 2019. I was listening to a lot of podcasts out there and around recruiting and talent acquisition, and they were kind of flat. They were kind of dry. And I was like, you know what? I think I could do this better. I think I could add my own sense of humor, energy into it. And I started off talking to heads of talent, recruiters out there, and we were talking shop. We were talking about the industry. But then I started to book a couple of guests that were outside of talent and recruitment because I was interested in their story and their journey. And that was about 25, 30 episodes in. And that's kind of like where one of the first light bulbs went off. And I said, I'm interested in the journey. How did somebody get to where they are? And if we could infuse the HR, the TA, the hiring side. And I figured out how to morph those questions into it. So, for example, if it was a decision maker within an organization, I ask how they hire. How do you assess, character versus skill? How do you assess values? What are those questions? But it all ties back to the journey. So the show is really about unpacking somebody's life journey told through the lens of their career. And that's kind of the tagline that I like to use. So career and life journeys.
Yeah, and so the journeys part, that's what the essence of the show really is. The journey.
It's all about the journey.
Persons. Yeah. I love that. So tell us about your journey, Adam. So you started out in advertising and marketing, I believe, right?
Yeah.
In NYC,
Yeah.
15 years before you got into recruitment. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was kind of always in my blood. I mean, I knew, ever since even, high school and college that I was going to get into marketing and communications. And that's what I did. I had some great internships. I really understood the value of what it's so interesting now. I think a lot of people kind of devalued internships. And I think that I'm going off on a tangent here. And I think that's because, listen, back in the day and even now, a lot of the internships were unpaid. And for better or worse, looking back on it now, yeah, I should have been paid something. But back then, you knew that you had to pay your dues. It was part of the game. It was part of the process, right? You sucked it up. You paid your dues. But you know what? That looked great on your resume. And if I didn't do those internships, it wouldn't have opened up those first doors for me. And it wouldn't have laid the groundwork for me to get into marketing and advertising because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to stand out. It would have just been all these other college kids coming out of school. And, what's going to separate you from them? It's experience. So I was able to go into those first interviews and speak from experience of working in a big ad agency and some other internships that I had. And that's what I did. First 15 years working in account management strategy on the ad agency side. I went in-house to American Express and SiriusXM for a number of years. So I really learned both sides of both internal, brand side, and then external in an agency as well. Did that for 15 years. And then landed what I thought was my dream job at VaynerMedia. Told this story ad nauseum for the last, almost 6 years. I thought the grass was greener on the other side, and it turned out it wasn't. It wasn't the right place for me. I wasn't the right place for them. It wasn't the right time, and ultimately I ended up losing my job. Famous story, Gary Vee sitting down with me on my way out saying, Adam, it's not that we don't like you. It's just not the right place, not the right time, and you really need to focus on your strengths and stop focusing on your weaknesses. And all signs pointed towards recruiting. And, I spent a couple of months of really deep introspective. What do I want to do? Who I am? And eating a lot of humble pie, man. The thought of starting a new career, the start of starting from zero at age 35 was scary. That was scary. I was like, shit, I have to learn a whole new industry. And then there was a process of finding a recruitment agency that was going to take me on with that experience. And luckily for me, I found a great agency. Spent a couple of years learning the art and science of recruitment, and then went out on my own and launched NHP Talent Group. And there's the story.
That's crazy. That's great. That's a great story. So VaynerMedia, huge name, of course, right? Anyone in any social media circle knows who
Right.
Gary Vaynerchuk is. You sat down with the person. And he is famous for saying that. He's famous for saying that it's just about fit, right? Now, going through your own journey of like coming to your own realization of what was the right fit for you, and that famous advice of stop focusing on your weaknesses and focus on your strength. How does that influence how you advise like in your recruitment role, both sides of it, right? And that's a really powerful story. I'm sure it's a very powerful story you've told multiple times to clients on both sides, right? For both on the business side and also maybe on the client, talent side as well. Like, you've got so many of these powerful stories, and you seem to be very good at connecting people together. You seem to be very good at identifying opportunities and whatnot. How has all that influenced to how you do recruitment today?
That's a really good question, and I don't think anyone's ever positioned it that way, which is shocking because it seems like an obvious question. I think it really comes down when I'm talking to candidates that I'm coaching on the career. I do a bit of career coaching as well there too. And when people talk about the pivot, when people talk about what they want to do, what they like to do, and it's always like that intersection, right? If you find in your career your passion and your work, intersect, that's the gold, right? Like that's what you really want to be doing. But I also advise people that sometimes you might have to take 2 steps back or maybe 3 steps back to take a big giant leap forward. And that's a tough pill for people to swallow. And that's when I really rely back on your strengths. These are things you're great at. These are things you love to do. Are you getting them in your current job? Are you getting them? Are you fulfilled right now? And if the answer is no, then I really need you to really take a deep breath, take a step back and think, okay, am I open to a period of time where I might make a bit less money, where I may have to pay my dues again, but it's going to make me happy? And eventually in the long run, if I'm happy, I'm going to work harder, be my best self, and be more financially successful in the future. So I think it's really about positioning and giving an example of my story and how that was an insanely tough pill for me to swallow, but it got me to where I am now. And listen, I say it all the time. Like if I didn't do that, like let's just say, after I got let go, I decided to stay in account management and strategy at the agency side. A couple of things. First of all, I probably wouldn't have been happy. I would have had a tough time interviewing because I would have had to tell that story how I got fired after 7 months. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I was lying to myself because I wasn't happy doing it. Sure, I was fine at it. I wasn't amazing at it. I was fine. I was able to get jobs and do pretty well. I mean, my performance, at Vayner, I mean, there's a whole story to that, which I'm going to park for a little bit. But at the end of the day, I could do the job, but I didn't love it. And I knew that I needed to make more money. And I saw my friends that were working in recruitment that were doing really well, but I knew that it took time. And it was all part of the process. I mean, luckily for me, I have an amazing wife, partner who, knew that. And we knew that it was going to take time to get to that place financially. And it did eventually. And we haven't looked back.
And that advice about like double down on your strengths, right? That I guess applies after you've spent enough time exploring, right? There's an explore and exploit phase. That's the classic terminology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know in that advice framework, how do you know when it's time to exploit versus explore? Like when's the time to pivot? That's
a good question too. I think generally speaking, this is tough to do early in your career, but there are elements you can do because people have younger and younger. I mean, people have passions with technology, social media, right? Like you know your passion now. Like my 12-year-old knows that what she kind of wants to do. I didn't know that what the hell I wanted to do till I was like 15, 16, 17. When something lights you up inside, when you enjoy doing it, when you think about doing it, when it's in your blood, when that's all you can't get out of your mind, whether it be business building, whether it be something creative outlet, whatever it is, that's when you know what it is. The other side of that too is when you're getting recognition for something that you're doing from people that you admire, from clients, from friends, when they see you doing things well, those are kind of the key indicators around, what those strengths are, what you receive positive feedback on, what you feel good doing, what you feel challenging in a good way. Those are all the strengths. It's interesting too. I look back on strengths and weaknesses and I look back at things that also I don't like to do. There's also a lot of things we don't like to do, but we might be good at them. So you have to separate things you're good at because you like to do them and things you don't like to do because you're not good at them and not focus on them. Like I learned early on, I'm not a numbers guy. I don't like crunching spreadsheets. I don't like doing analysis. I don't like that. I'm a creative. I'm a left brain. I need to really be in that creative mindset. And it's kind of weird. It's like I'm able to go off the deep end as far as creative thought process, but also come back and be super, OCD laser focused on getting things accomplished. So also understanding how your mind works and when you're most productive and when you're most effective, that comes down to strengths and weaknesses as well. And then there's where those areas for self-improvement. Like, I'm good at something. I like doing it. How do I do this even better? Instead of focusing on trying to fix things. Listen, there's weaknesses that need to be fixed. Let's be fair about that. For personal development, behavior, character, all those things too. There's other things. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm not going to go start working in accounting because I don't like that.
This is where I guess younger people, I guess as I get older, this is becoming more and more clear. And I think that some of it just does come with time. I look right now for my little sister. She's like picking, which university course she wants to apply for, or if that's even the right thing for her. And, the advice I give her as well is like, okay, well, what are you good at and what do you enjoy? You need both, is what you said there, right? And then on the point about fixing your weaknesses, I guess maybe a framework for that, tell me what your thoughts are on this, is if you should fix the weaknesses that are the limiting factor for your strength. Some people try to be well-rounded. They think I should be good at creative and I should be good at accounting. But if you're just good at creative, but then to be good at creative, you also need to get good at computers right now, for example, right? Your IT needs to get better because that's the limiting factor on your creative ability right now. Then go for that, fix that weakness so that can propel your strength. But if it's like completely left field, that's not going to help you in that, and it's something that someone else can be good at, then leave it aside and focus on what you're good at, right?
Well, outsourcing. I mean, that's also kind of like, to go off tangent there, anything somebody could do better, cheaper, faster that I don't want to learn or don't need to, I'm going to outsource. I'll transition nicely into podcasting. When I started doing my show, I didn't want to learn video editing, audio editing. I wanted to focus on the content and the guest relationship because I knew the guest relationship was going to drive the business of the show. So I outsourced it. And now it's trial and error too, to find the right editor, to find the right team. I was working with a Fiverr editor that I didn't like, and went through that process of outsourcing and finding until I found a great partner that was with me for a number of years. And that person was able to do it faster, cheaper, better because that was their skill set. And I didn't have to go learn something I really didn't want to do. I didn't want to learn how to do video and audio editing. That's not my bag. That's not what I want to be doing. And a lot of podcasters do that. They feel they need to. And there is, if you think about it one way, there is like, all right, I'm going to save some money and do it myself. But to what extent are you spending your time to learn something you really don't need to do? And then obviously now with technology, let's talk about Riverside right now. You could pretty much do everything in Suite on Riverside, which I do a lot of, especially with AI, with clips and all the other technology that's out there where you really don't need a full team these days for it. But back then, 5 years ago, it's so crazy. 5 years ago, right? We're talking 5 years ago, a year before the pandemic. It's crazy. I needed that because you didn't have the full suite of Riverside and other products out there.
I love that. Let's go back to your podcast, Adam. And I want to focus it more around purpose. Because I feel like that's like so important to you. Like, and it just comes back to the name, right? It's like the story about why did you decide to name your company after your daughter? And the reason for that was because what's most important to me right now? So that already tells me your decision-making framework, which is what's important to me and how do I make decisions around that. Having interviewed 336 people? How many episodes in?
Well, with live shows and live events, we're talking almost 450. Yeah,
exactly.
It's a lot of interviews.
That many episodes. It's a lot of interviews and a lot of conversations about what's their purpose. What is purpose? What's the overarching framework you've learned about applying your purpose to your work?
So, at the end of every episode, I ask a couple of questions that are boilerplate. They're always boilerplate because for me, those two questions really bring the purpose of the show back to what it is. So the first question is a spin on the classic. Everyone asks on the show, what's the greatest piece of advice? What's your great? But the spin that I put on it is advice that you received every day, that you act on every day, right? Because there's like high level kind of this, pie in the sky kind of advice, the golden rule and all that kind of stuff too. But then there's the stuff that's really going to drive you every day to be your best self. For me, that is plan your work and work your plan. It's very simple. I repeat it every morning when I turn on my computer and everything. That was taught to me by my recruitment mentor, Tom Hull, on my first day of recruiting. He says, before you do anything every day, plan your work and work your plan. Plan your work and work your plan. So that's going back to Gary Vee, that's clouds and dirt. Like plan your work. Here's the overarching strategy, and then work that plan. What are you going to do every single day tactically to achieve those goals? And for me, that manifests in the daily Post-it, right? Everyone has their way. I have my to-do list right here. Plan your work and work your plan. The other part of that, the second answer, which is really the closer, the encore, the home run swing, whatever the hell you want to call it. I ask, what is your North Star? What is your beacon? What is your focus? What is your compass? What keeps you on the straight? And it's so funny too, because listen, as a podcast host, you can't assume that every guest is going to listen to your show before they come on it. You can't assume that, because I've learned that it doesn't happen, because guests act surprised when I ask them those 2 freaking questions at the end of the show. I'm like, I literally have asked that 325 times, because I don't think I did it all the first 25 episodes, but then I got into it, and that's my show. And I kind of like when they don't do it, because it kind of hits them off guard. Some of them are prepared and they know it's coming, but others don't. But the North Star question kind of really brings it back to the why. Why are you doing this? Why? What is your North Star? And I have my North Star in life, which are my kids and my family, and my purpose to be my best for them. And then I have the North Star of the show. And the North Star of the show is to shine a light on others, to really bring out the best of them. And straight up, when I do that well, that light is organically going to reflect back on me. And there's no better compliment as a host when you hit that end record button and that guest goes, Adam, that was a fantastic show. I love talking to you. Because at the end of the day, I don't want it to be an interview. I want it to be a conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Why do you think having staple questions is so powerful? A lot of hosts do that, but I don't think I've ever asked this question. Having a staple question and having a free flow element to your podcast. I think everyone can understand why a podcast should be free flowing, why it should be natural. That kind of lends itself to the medium. But then, there's something powerful about having staple questions, even if people don't listen to it beforehand. For the audience, for the host, for the guest, what is it about that makes good for a podcast format?
Well, it's a delicate balance. I have those 2 staple questions at the end, but not at the beginning. In the beginning, I usually have a framework. Listen, I do a lot of preparation for my show. But the thing is, it needs to be seamless when I'm not sitting there reading questions. There's nothing worse when I come as a guest on a show, there's nothing worse than sitting there and someone has prepared questions, or they're asking me for too much in advance. What I like to do is I like to ask my guests to provide 3 things they're passionate about right now at this current time. A couple bullets, a couple words here or there. That's going to help me kind of focus. And obviously, what they're pitching, and I do that at the end, they're promoting a book, they're promoting a podcast, they're promoting a movie, whatever they're doing, that's fine, because that's a plug and that's what you got to do. But there's no standard questions except for the last 2. And it's interesting, I kind of have this flow. So lately, over the past 4 or 5 months, I've been asking a lot about what their parents did. And I try to do a little bit of research, because some people don't come from the traditional home. Not everyone has 2 parents. Not everyone has parents, right? So I try to be sensitive to that and do a little bit of research. But when I ask about what people's parents do, it lights them up. It lights them up in most cases. Some cases, it's fucking traumatic as hell, and you don't want to hear any of those stories. But then that's where the preparation comes in, right? Right? You don't, if your dad was a serial killer murderer, right? You don't want to be asking about pops over there, right? But
that's going to show up. You can Google them and you'll find that out. Sometimes they're just alcoholic abusive and you didn't know, right? It's not going to.
But that could be also. But that could also be part of their story. And I've had those stories before. I've had some people that have gone through some complete awful traumatic, childhood and life experiences. But when you talk about that, I like to bring that into the part of the story. It's all right. For example, for me, my parents and my brother are all in education. They were teachers. My brother's in education, and I'm the complete opposite of that. So how did that influence me to get to where I am? And that makes for interesting parts of the story. So what I try to do as a host is find those nuggets and be able to tell the story. I have an arc. I want to talk about your upbringing, your beginning, your career, the journey, how you kind of get into that. And then when you have a framework for that, you're able to do what you just did, is make that left or right turn off script because you thought something was interesting, because you heard something, and you're not laser focused on now the next question. Now tell me how you did this. Now then what did you do? And I'm reading off the script like a robot. I hate that. So if I'm a guest on a show like that, I'll throw the host off right away and I'll just take over the show, because I'm like, you don't know what the hell you're doing, and I'm going to try to give you a better experience for your, for your listeners and your fans, and try to teach you something. And not like in an obnoxious way. It's more like, let me try to lead by example and help you guide this show in the right way. So I think it's important to have questions. I mean, I am super prepared. I have 3 shows coming up this week that I'm recording, and I've done a ton of research. And the more research you do into the guest, you're able to really kind of go off script and also listen to what they said in all these other shows. I don't want to repeat what everyone said on every other show. I want to pull out new nuggets and new information to make it more interesting for you and the listener, especially if it's somebody that's been on, a ton of shows.
We never do more than an outline. So we call it script in GHA when we help clients with their podcasts and everything like that. But like script, we also realize very quickly means different things to different people.
Correct.
Like we just say like bullet points, having an outline. So you have some direction, let yourself go, like when we're coaching clients as well, right? We say, let yourself go off topic and follow. Like rabbit holes are more than welcome. If you're both interested and you're both enjoying it, that's the key, both enjoying it. Not just like one person's ranting on and the other person's not. If you're both enjoying it, there's something magical about that conversation, and that
100%.
That enthusiasm is contagious. And that is what, at the end of the day, the listener wants, right? They want to feel like they're part of a conversation which is engaging, but not just engaging in the content and the topic itself, but you can tell when people are really, it's like when you say, you got to smile on the phone. When you're on a phone call, smile, right? It's a classic sales advice. Because you can hear a smile, which sounds crazy. You can also hear enthusiasm and connection and interest and, just being part of something really interesting. I mean, like, the beauty of podcasting as well is you can have a huge podcast in tiny, tiny niches. If you're just enthusiastic about it and you just do a solo podcast, or you and a friend are enthusiastic and you do all the episodes, there's going to be an audience for that. It might be small, but if you become really important to a small audience, that's just as powerful. And in fact, it's often the best advice. Sam Altman has a bunch of these reels going around right now where he says, when he was in Y Combinator before ChatGPT took off and everything, he said the best startups were the ones that captured a really big piece of a very small market.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, you should be really, really important to a very small group of people, because they're just going to be so passionate about your product, it's going to propel it forward. And then you can expand from there and get bigger and from there. But the best ones start out really, really niche. And he gave a bunch of examples about how that happens. I think podcasting is very similar to that as well, where if you just start with a really interesting topic, it's more that. You just got to be really interesting and have an interesting time, then you're going to find the audience for that. That's what we typically find.
Well, I'm gonna put a little spin on that. I think as a host and just in general, I want to be more interested than interesting. Mm. Curiosity for me is one of the most desirable traits in a friend, spouse, human being. Mm. I want people that are curious. I want people to ask the why. And I think a lot of podcast hosts focus more on themselves than the next question. There's a balance between on an interview podcast. There's a balance between how much, in my opinion, a host should talk versus the guest. And I might different. I'm kind of in the 70-30 camp towards obviously the guest, and I think that a good host will drive the conversation and know when. Believe me, I get up on my soapbox plenty of times on my show, but I also have learned when to kind of put the brake on it and listen, because at the end of the day, your audience is the most important. Without your audience, you have nothing. The audience's auditory experience from a quality perspective, are they enjoying it? Does it sound good clarity-wise, all the production part? But as you mentioned before, are they interested? Could they feel that excitement? Do they want to listen to the conversation? Do they want to hear more? Because once you lose your audience, you have nothing. So you owe it to your audience. That's, again, why I do my research on my guests. I listen to past shows. Do they have the energy? Are they enthusiastic? Are they a good orator? Could they, articulate? Are they duds? I don't want a dud on my show. I learned that the hard way. I've had a couple of really bad podcasts early on. And even now, of course, you're going to get one or two that just aren't, I'm like, well, you didn't bring the thunder. For example, I had a top A-list guest on my show in the last couple of years. I'm not going to name any names. And I was super excited to have this person on the show. And maybe I caught this person, and this person has their own show. They're on a lot of shows. And I think I might have just caught this person maybe after a long night of travel, late flight, tired in the morning, and they were fine. The content was good, but there was an energy level that was missing that I was expecting. So sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, but you have as a host to know when to step it up. I've also had times, honestly, man, where maybe my average show is about 44 minutes long, because I look at the data. I see when the fall off is, when people are kind of done listening. There's sometimes I have a guest on and I'm not feeling it. Like, it's just not what I'm doing. And I'll try to tighten the show up and wrap it up as quickly as I can, because I want to be mindful of my guest and my audience.
No, I like that. Interested. So let me give you my my little hack. So you said it earlier that the best compliment you can get is when you stop hitting record and the guest says, that was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that, not to boast, I've had that plenty of times. And
Yeah, it feels good.
My experience of that, though, yeah, it feels great. But my experience of that is, yeah, I know you had a great time because I let you talk about yourself, and I let you talk, and I gave you your soapbox. I gave you the space to get your point across, and that feels good. And you're associating that with me.
Yeah.
I did a great job of interviewing you. Maybe my great job of interviewing was just shutting up, right? Because
exactly. But you also want to be mindful of not giving. You also have to be. I've gotten very good at interrupting, because you also have to know when someone's just out there just preaching and just going on too long and rambling, and you have to. And I learned that from Howard Stern, and Howard Stern is obviously has earned that right, where he could interrupt A-list biggest stars on the planet, politicians, actors, sports, right? He's earned that right. But I've listened to him. I'm a student of his game for 30 years, and the way he interrupts, right? Because there's different ways to interrupt. There's ways to interject, and there's ways to interrupt to stop the conversation and pivot. I kind of call it the record scratch, kind of hard stop, right? Like quick hit the brakes, pivot, because we've beaten that point. That point is done. Let's move on. Let's keep it going. Or the person's just up there yapping. So figuring out how to do that also makes for, and that takes skill too, and it takes practice too, because you don't want to be rude. There's different ways to do it, different techniques, but it also comes with a feel of, in that conversation, how do you interrupt? And how do you not interrupt just to make your point louder than the guest? That's the last thing you want to do. You don't ever want to go over them. You don't want to ever make them feel little or stupid, right? Like you never want to do that. So it takes practice.
Do you listen back to your shows?
All the time. I listen back right away.
Oh, really? Are you not mentally drained a little bit?
I don't record more than 2 shows a day. I learned that the hard way early on. One time I was trying to be slick and I did 3 shows in one day. By the end of the second show, I was drained because it takes so much. Any podcast host out there knows this takes effort because you're paying attention and you're listening. You have the lights and the cameras and everything. And you have to know your limits. You have to know when to say when, right? So I usually listen back within a day or so. And then obviously I always listen back when the edit comes back. I want to hear it. I want to make sure that the ad's in the right spot. I want to make sure because at the end of the day, it's my show and I have somebody else producing it and I need to hear it before. What if they just completely butchered it and I didn't even quality control it? And I also like to rate my performance. I also like to know when I reach back out to the guests to share the episode with them, why I really like this episode so much. Because usually I'm about 6 to 10 episodes ahead. So I might have forgotten the conversation and I want to hear it back.
Yeah. My experience has been that most of the best hosts typically do that. And one of them is that you need that feedback loop, right? If you go hundreds of episodes and you've never listened to yourself back, yeah, okay, you see the stats going up. Yeah, sure, you see that this going up. But then my experience of what makes the best host is, and what makes a great host, like when I'm listening to Lex Friedman, or if I'm listening to Chris Williamson, or if I'm listening to Joe Rogan or whatever, right? Top quality hosts. What I've found is they ask the question that I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. Lex does that. Lex all the time. Lex and Rogan are great at it.
Yeah, it's like, and that's what it hit me. I was like, that's exactly what I've asked. And there's very few times in those great ones, because a lot of other ones that maybe they're not great hosts for me, or I don't resonate with their content as well. They're big hosts. But I'm like, yeah, but I would have asked that. Like, I want to know this. He said this point. Why did he not go down that thread?
Well, that's what
I really want to know what
Stern is a master of, right? That's what Howard Stern is a master of, because he's asking the real questions. He's asking about money, sex, relationships. He's asking all those questions that they can't always answer in a regular press junket, right? When they're doing regular press and interviews, because he also has the format to do that. He has an uncensored hour, an hour and a half, however long he wants to go. And he's also built up the credibility where he can ask those tough questions. But to your point, so it's like, oh yeah, tell me, that's what I would have asked you if I'm sitting right there, because I want to know that shit, right? That's the gold as a podcast host. How do you pull that out?
I think you're blind to that unless you listen back to your shows. Because a lot of the time you can listen back to your show. Because in the moment, like, I'm going to listen back to this. I'm going to be like, man, I should have asked Adam about this. Like, why did he mentioned that? Like, I'm sure that would be interesting. But until I listen back to it, I was in the recording and I'm listening to it as a listener. And then I'm picking up on, I didn't even hear that. Or actually, when Adam was speaking, I was thinking about something he said in the first sentence and formulating my next question, and therefore I missed a better point that he said in sentence number 3.
It's hard.
And that's a lesson to me to say, okay, no, I need to, give myself the time afterwards. And here's the other thing I see a lot of hosts do wrong in that comment, in that point, right? I've given myself space after you stop speaking to then come up with my question. Because then I've listened to your entire point. And the thing is, that can be edited out later. That will get edited out later. That pause, my editors know that, okay, because Sam always does this. But that's important because then I'm listening to your complete point. I'm like, okay, I have so many questions, but I think that's the most important one. And then over time, you get better at it and better at it.
I'll share a little story that I've shared occasionally. About 25 episodes in, someone that I deeply trust, and I was like, hey, like, you've listened to a bunch of episodes, what do you think? And she says to me, Adam, I could hear you thinking of the next question before you ask it. You're not even listening to the guest. And that's when the light bulb went off. And thank God I knew that, 4.5 years ago. I learned that lesson early on, to shut up and listen. Because as you mentioned before, that's where the gold is. That's where you hear that, wait a minute, did he really just say that? Now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. Now we're going to make that left turn. Because that's interesting, right? The treasure's in the shit pit. The treasure's in those rabbit holes, not in the same standard boilerplate questions. That's what I hate also. Like there's a lot of hosts, a lot of guests, they send me their media kit and they literally list 20 questions to ask this guest. You mean to tell me you want to go on every single show and ask those questions? No. That's why I ask them 3 passion points. I'm not asking them questions. I just want to know what they're interested in right now. What are those 3 things that they're interested in? Now, some podcast coaches will be like, no, that's on the host. You do all your research. And I'm like, I have no problem asking people for their headshot, their bio, and the 3 questions. Not one person has ever said to me, Adam, screw you, find it yourself. No, you just send it. It takes 2 seconds. You just do it. Jeez.
Yeah. And I mean, guests often feel honored to come on the show, right? So they're willing to help and they're willing to
it's a little lift.
And people are, most people are nice. That's my experience of life in general. That's how I like to look at the world.
And if you're not nice, don't come on the show.
Also that. This is selection bias. Bring you a little bit back towards podcasting and your business and everything like that, Adam. You mentioned that podcasting, your podcast, the Poscast, makes you different to the average recruiter. All right. So how does it do that? How do you use your podcast to differentiate yourself as a recruiter? There's the great content, there's the interesting, there's the everything like that. How does it specifically help NHP Talent?
Yeah, I mean, it really was something that kind of clicked about 30, 40 episodes in, where I started to reach out to decision makers at companies that I wanted to do business with. And I would invite them onto the show. And I wouldn't stick my hand out for a sale. I wouldn't stick my hand out for, say, hey, I'm a recruiter, until after the show aired. They would finish the episode, be like, Adam, that was a great conversation. I appreciate it. And sometimes organically, they'd be like, what do you do for a living? Or they'd see this sign up that I've had up since pretty much day one. And it's like, oh, there's a recruiting business. And of course, before the show, I looked at it like, hey, hey, Assam, I noticed you have 6 open roles in your organization. Like, you know what? We could use a hand with that. Or, hey, we don't need help right now. And it turned into a relationship first before handout asking for business. So I would say in the last 5 years of my show in relation to the business, I would say at least 60+% has been driven by the podcast. Relationships directly correlated to the podcast. And I built out the system. I built out the follow-up. I have a very firm system of how I do outreach, follow-up, scheduling, and it's nothing crazy. But it shocks me how many hosts do not have a good process. They're sloppy. And if I show a guest a good, clean, professional process, that shows them that I understand client management, that I understand how to schedule, manage expectations, account management. So when I go to reach out for business, they see that I'm polished up professional. It all works together. It is all your brand. How you do anything is how you do everything.
100%.
And I preach that. And I call out, like, I try to do it in an effective way when people reach out to me for the show. And I'm like, hey, by the way, are we like the thing I hate, and I'll be straight up, like, you should confirm with your guest a day before with a prep email. Hey, Adam, I'm excited to have you on the show Monday morning. Just a couple things to go over. We're recording audio and video. Here's the link again. I'm excited. We're going to go over a couple things, X, Y, and Z. Let's do it. I know that you are locked in. I've been invited to shows, and the host didn't even show up because someone else scheduled it and they didn't and I go, I'm done. And if they don't reach out to you right away, like, why should I have to follow up with you because you missed? Like, come on, that's amateur hour, man. Good luck booking me again. You just wasted my time. You want to, sorry, one last thing. Time is someone's most valuable asset. And if you don't honor and respect someone's time, I'm done. I will always give someone the benefit of the doubt. Listen, shit happens in life. I'm going to give you a pass. Things happen once. But if you don't come clean and we don't fix it right away, you're not valuing my time. And I see that I'm not moving forward.
100%. I like the idea, I like that point, right? Value first. And that's what you get. And I think the beauty of podcasting is you get to use it as a relationship tool, right? It's exactly that. It's that high-level executive. Maybe they have a recruiting problem that they have in the back of their head, but they're probably getting outreach from a bunch of recruiters, or maybe not, or maybe they have 100 other emails and whatever.
Everyone's getting hammered.
Exactly, right? But then if you already build a relationship with them first, and then you go to them and say, hey, by the way, I do this. If you're interested, if you have something that's great. He knows you. He's built rapport with you. You've naturally done it. And we always say, like, a potential client, if that's your industry, is more likely to say yes to a podcast interview than a sales call. Like, the conversion rates just speak for themselves.
Dude, it's not even close. It's my number one biz dev tool by far and away. I hate cold calling.
Yeah. But then you also do it at a velocity that most people don't. Maybe it's because you've seen the result, right? You do it at like a commitment. You're this many episodes in, man. You're locked in. Like, people don't get to this many episodes. What's been the secret to staying consistent? Is it because you've seen the value of the results? You probably didn't see that the first 50 episodes.
Dude, I didn't cross 250 downloads until almost a year in. But you also have to separate too. It's not always about the downloads. I didn't see the results till almost a year in. I didn't see the clients coming in till almost a year in. And that's when I went off. And that's when I said, I don't really give a crap about the number of downloads. I really don't, because I'm generating business. And I'm not someone in pop culture who is going to have a built-in audience. It's going to take too much work to get to these zillion downloads and that top 0.5% that make a killing. People don't realize it. There's zillions of podcasts out there. There's just such a small amount that make really big numbers. So I found other ways to monetize through business development, through sponsorships in my niche area, in my niche recruiting market. What I'm doing now is taking the show on the road. I'm doing live podcasting at HR and TA talent acquisition events where I'm getting paid to, sponsors are paying me to do the show live and then showcase them and their clients. So once you change the dynamic of what success looks like in podcasting, then you could reverse engineer how to get there and what's most important.
Tell me about the live. So we're really interested in all the things you can do with your podcast outside of the actual podcast, right? That's what we're really passionate about in GHA, is that podcasting as a client acquisition tool, podcasting as a backlinking tool, podcasting as a social media gold mine, whatever
thought
else,
leadership,
right?
all that stuff. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, right? 101 ways you can use podcasting for your business. That's what Podcast Gurus is all about, right? To dig deeper into that. The live shows. Why did you start doing live shows? What do you see as the advantage of that towards your business goal that you just set out? Right?
Yeah.
What is that all about?
There's a few different types of live shows. So there's live stream. There's live stream shows, which are great because they're present, and there's nothing better than me as a host. I love being in the moment. I've done like 2-3 hour live streams where that really tests your chops as a host, your endurance, and how you could pivot between guests. Also, when I literally just scheduled one this morning. I do once a quarter, once every couple of months. I do a hiring leader roundtable where I invite multiple leaders and we do a live stream show. And my prep for that is literally in the week in advance. I'm writing down the 4 hot topics of what's happening in our industry, and then I'm just teeing them up and we're having an open roundtable conversation. The live stream is interesting. People like to get involved. Then there's live events, which I mentioned before. Being out there, that is a whole different ball game. Being in front of people versus the screen, that really tests your chops as a host too. Can you do it? And I love doing that. For me, that's like center stage, and I'm in my element there. So finding different ways to get out from behind the screen, and not everybody could do it. It's cost prohibitive, time prohibitive, and you have to find the right logistics and sponsors that go into that. But that's what's going to increase your content, where it's not just this 2-way video, but it's live. You know, I like to occasionally bring guests into a New York City studio. I'm about an hour outside of Manhattan. I have a studio space in the city, which I have access to every so often. And anytime I could have a guest on the couch next to me, that's a completely different vibe and energy that you're getting from these guests. So finding different ways to kind of switch it up. Now, the live event thing too is fascinating because that means some company values you for your skill and your audience and your reach. They're putting their name behind you. They trust you to deliver a great performance and to showcase their guests that they're inviting on in a way, and then put their name behind it and spread the word of their organization. So you have to honor that and really do a lot of work to make sure it's excellent.
100%. So is it working towards the business goal of client acquisition through your podcast, or is it working towards just growing the brand? What is the purpose of the live event specifically, and how you're using podcasts to help NHP?
All of them, absolutely, because it increases me as a thought leader, increases my brand, increases my visibility out there. Other brands see me out there. They see me at all these events that are industry-leading events. Adam must know something. He must know the right people. He must know what the hell he's talking about if these companies are putting money behind him to represent them in the marketplace. And then from a content perspective, I mean, the content I did from Transform in March in Vegas, I mean, I'm broadcasting live from an industry event. Well, not live, but live in person. It wasn't live streamed. And it's on the fly and it's exciting and they can see what's going on around the event as well there too. And there's a cachet to that. You know, that increases your brand awareness and perception. Oh, look, Adam's out there. This company hired him to do that, and he's kicking ass at it. Look at that. We're all the brand, man.
Yeah, that's 100%. I mean, that's the digital age, right? Your online CV and your online resume. I mean, as a recruiter, you know that more than most. I also think that, so we make these like trailers for episodes, like kind of Diary of a CEO style and everything like that. And we've started playing with getting B-roll straight from our client. Anytime you see a video of someone on a stage, it instantly gives them authority. Like straight away, just being on a stage, like you were important enough to be on a stage, which is kind of reductive when you say it like that. It's weird to say, like, why is that so important? You might as well just go hire a stage, hire a few people to sit at the front.
Yeah, make it look real. Yeah, fake.
Make it look real. Put that as your LinkedIn profile pic. See how many people see you as a thought leader after that. So definitely there's like that. And then I guess a great way of that is once you have that content, you have that on your resume, that gives you access to the next tier of guests as well. Mm-hmm. And that's like, at the end of the day, if you want to really grow your podcast, the size of your guests is just so important, right? So like getting access to that next tier, you need to be someone worth being. Now, you got to have a track record, which you do, right? But then sometimes just break through, they also need some social proof, is what we call it, right? So you need some social proof to make sure that they're actually someone worth listening to or worth someone worthy of having you, maybe you're a bit more of an A-list celebrity or guest on. But it gives you that social proof, right? You were on a stage, you had that brand next to you, they recognized you, they put their trust in you. Then they actually maybe see the content. Oh yeah, Adam is actually a pretty good host. I do want to get interviewed by him. I like his energy. I like the questions he asks. He's not going to snake me. He's going to be professional.
Don't snake a guest.
You learned that the hard way?
No, it's just doing things the right way. It's reputation. I've had the opportunity to like ask dirty questions. You know, it's just not the reputation that you want to have. Just not the right way to do things. Who's going to want to come on your show if you do that? Like, oh man, he's going to sandbag me. He's going to ask me. Now, with that being said, there's a balance of poking the bear, and I poke the bear plenty, right? Because you want to bring out something good, but it's how you position it respectfully and ask a potentially controversial, it's poking the bear respectfully. You're not insulting them. You're not coming too far out of left field on the question. You're doing it within a respectful lane, and that takes skill. And I've done it a couple times, and the result's been great. And usually, a good guest who's been done it, they'll respect the game if you do it the right way. You're not trying to anger them. You're not trying to piss them off. You don't want them to hit the hang up button. You're not trying to insult them. But you're trying to, rattle things up a little bit and ask something a little bit off.
And hopefully something different. I mean, I think you've appreciated, I said a couple times, the questions you haven't been asked before. That's a fun mental exercise to go through as well, right? Especially when you've done it so many times and everything like that. You want to get asked things in a way that, I mean, there's the typical question. What's one question no one's asked you that they wish they did, Adam? Do you have one?
No. I don't think about that. I've not given 1 ounce of thought into that. I'm being straight up with you. Like, I don't have like a list of questions in my head that I wish people would ask me. It's not because it's not my job.
Well, there you go. That's plenty about interviewing hosts. Adam, it was amazing having you on. Thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus. If people want to find out more, where should they go? Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, Adam J. Posner. You can check out the show at the Pozcast.com, the Pozcast.
and all recruitment needs, check out nhptalentgroup.com.
Awesome. All the links will be in the show notes below. Adam, thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Nice.